Franchise
This meeting is being recorded.
Take two. Good afternoon and welcome to the Franchise Oversight Board's first Belmont Redevelopment Informational Meeting. My name is Robert Williams and I serve as a member of the Franchise Oversight Board. I'm here today in Schenectady with my fellow board members, Victor Franco and Chris Higgins. And on video online today, we also have Robert Smith. Jim Town, who's our fifth member, is conflicted, but was hopeful he might be able to join us before we conclude. I'm also joined here by Steve Lowenstein, who's the board secretary and administrative officer. And online, we're joined by David Perino, who serves as the Franchise Oversight Board's counsel. As most observers are aware, the Office of General Services serves as the board's permitting agency. Thus, with us today, I see that we have Brad Allen, who is counsel for OGS. We have Associate Counsel Michelle Reel, Code Compliance Manager Vinny DiBiase, who was hopeful to be able to attend as well. The Franchise Oversight Board, acting through the Office of General Services, has contracted with the NYRA Group to serve as a management representative of the Franchise Oversight Board during the Belmont project. I know from the NYRA Group, we anticipate having Associate Vice President Lawrence Fitzpatrick, Project Manager Darren Cosgrave, and Project Engineer Soraya Batista. Obviously, the guest of honor is the New York Racing Association. Joining us from NYRA, I know there's a number of people there, and the image quality is such I can't tell, but I do believe we have with us Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Renee Postal, Executive Vice President, Operations and Capital Projects, Glenn Kozak, and Director of Capital Projects, Robert Surace. NYRA's general contractor is ACOM Tishman. From Tishman, we anticipated having Executive Vice President at Tishman Construction, Rob Blackman, and Senior Vice President of Tishman Construction, Mike Goldberg. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being webcast for public accessibility and will be recorded and posted on the Franchise Oversight Board's website. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide greater awareness to a project that has substantial impact on both the state racing franchise and the property upon which Belmont Park rests. As the board has no present or future business to transact relating to this project, today's meeting is properly characterized as an informational meeting. For background relative to today, on May 3rd, 2023, Governor Kathy Hochul signed into law budget legislation which was necessary to implement the state 2023-24 fiscal plan. One element was Part X of Chapter 59, which authorized the renovation of Belmont Park. The law specifically referenced the anticipated costs of renovating Belmont to be $455 million, funded by utilizing NYRA's video lottery capital funds, with the state providing the initial financing up to $455 million, with repayment occurring through an agreement by allocating $25.8 million in capital funds annually back to the state until all state costs associated with the project have been reimbursed. The first disbursement under the agreement was for $70 million, which was made by Empire State Development to NYRA on August 1st, 2024. I think practically today, the Franchise Oversight Board would like to hear an overview of the development timeline, about project spending to date at a high level, a little bit about contracts that have been executed, led, or completed. I think we also want to discuss the minority-owned and women-owned and service-disabled veteran-owned business utilization and general workforce mobilization. And then before we conclude today, I'd like to get a development status update on the quality of life projects that were discussed at this board's March meeting. So I think to begin with on the timeline, just some very generic overviews. What is the target for completion date of the project? You can mime it out if you don't know.
No. This is John Crush speaking, the project director. We are, all our schedules right now are geared towards a TAO September 11th of 2026.
And from a practical standpoint, I think I'm just confirming what everybody knows, but the idea is to have the project in enough completion to see if we can host the Breeders' Cup in 2026. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So as I mentioned, I think there's about 23 months, actually 25 months left on the project, 23 months left on the project to remain on target. Could you do us a favor and walk us through the major component checkpoints that you're anticipating in the project development for the next 2 years?
Do you want to do this or? Okay, fine. All right, well, up to now, what's completed, we had a pretty significant abatement program that was completed, and that triggered demolition. Demolition on the site itself, where we're actually doing our building construction, is complete. And the next milestone was excavation and foundation work. That's underway right now. And we expect to have that done by, Mike?
By the end of January to allow for the superstructure concrete to commence.
Correct. So superstructure concrete will take a couple of months. We're just about ready to award structural steel. We'll go into shop drawing fabrication. So our target, the big milestone for us is to get the building enclosed. As you all know, we have a very complicated roof structure because we're building that canopy. You know, a bit of a challenge for us, but we've overcome that. And we expect to have the building enclosed so we can proceed with interior construction and fit out work in the beginning of 2026 in phases.
And from a practical standpoint, obviously we're extremely early in the entire development, but you're presently on target?
Yes, sir.
Outstanding. Conceptually, has anything changed since we considered the artist renderings back in March?
Not really. You know, we continuously apply value engineering as we award contracts to look at, you know, sort of conservation efforts through methods and means. But that's more about nuts and bolts and how the erector set is assembled. But we haven't really done anything where we're redesigning the building and we're making any kind of architectural or engineering sacrifices.
Okay.
We don't have time for it.
Actually, you raised an interesting question. How much, you know, given the end date target in September of 2026 and the runway that's necessary in order for Breeders' Cup to actually occur in that date, what kind of elasticity do you have in the overall contract?
Very little. Fortunately, we got an A team. One of the things that we have done, realizing the challenge of coordinating not just Tishman and the entire construction program, but there's also a pretty significant effort on the side of NYRA, as NYRA has to migrate into this new facility and take over all the operations. So in order to deal with that, we've hired a third-party scheduler, and that schedule will be producing for us a comprehensive schedule that will incorporate all significant activities, whether they're construction or racing or operations.
Yeah, it certainly seems sensible. Anybody have any questions about the timeline at this point?
No.
Mr. Smith? Nothing? Next item that we at least like to touch upon is the project spending to date at a high level. As I mentioned, the first $70 million of disbursement occurred on August 1st. It is my loose understanding that approximately half of it has been spent. So again, for an element, and keeping it at a high level that would be useful for people who don't play in the construction sandbox, what has the money been spent on so far? What is the expectation for the next $35 million that is, at least in my understanding, is unspent at this point?
Yeah, so to date, I think it's probably closer to 20 million. Large part of that has been the architectural design fees. And then
20 million spent or 20 million left?
20 million spent.
Okay.
And then, that's made up of some of the architectural design fees, and then about 7 million related to the actual construction. Over the next, I would say, 3 to 4 months, we'd probably be looking at a burn rate of anywhere from $5 to $7 million per month. We will have a big expenditure related to the first payment of the CSIP insurance program.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure, it's the contractor-controlled insurance program. It's based on hard construction costs, and as we have to make a 50% payment when that insurance program is bound, and that will be made in the month of October.
Okay. A little premature now, since I understand now you have approximately 50 million left on that initial bit, but for just a better understanding of the process, could someone explain to us what the mechanism is for requesting additional money and how that process is likely to unfold?
Yeah, so the process works where once we've spent 50% of the last disbursement, so in this case, $35 million, NYRA would then reforecast and submit another request. We can do that once every quarter, as long as we've already spent 50% of the money that we have.
And how does the paperwork flow?
We send our information over to Empire State Development for review and approval.
Okay. So one of the other things, of course, that we've talked about internally here is the audit process for verifying the spend. Can you give us a little, again, a high-level view as to how you're ensuring that the money that is spent is actually being spent appropriately and is properly backed up relative to payment of vouchers, et cetera, invoices?
Absolutely. So NYRA has hired a third-party cost management consultant. So really all the funding requests and financials is being reviewed by a third party. They reconcile all payments, including gathering all of the documentation that does get sent over to ESD. In addition, NYRA has also hired a third-party external construction auditor, Cohn Resnick. So it is being audited in 2 separate ways.
Okay. Anyone have any questions relative to the spends at this point? Mr. Huff? So let's, one of the other things I wanted to talk about was a little bit about the contracts that you guys have underway, you guys being NYRA or Tishman as the general contractor. I know that I get kind of at least a loose grouping of what bid packages are going out, what has been reviewed, what has been awarded. Can you give us a very high overview as to how that process works? And with perhaps a special focus as to how entities in the New York metropolitan area participate in that and what you do to ensure a widespread understanding of what the project is and where opportunities exist.
Okay, my name is Mike Goldberg, project executive for Tishman, and I'll respond to that. We have an extensive bidding process where we go through a trade contractor approval, we do background checks, so on and so forth, including MWBE participants and disabled or disability participant. In a nutshell, we've gone through the bidding process. Demo contractor was kind of awarded and assigned over to us when we arrived here, Breeze, which is almost completed with their work out of the way of the foundation. Foundation contractor, Rhetoric, has been on site for about a month. And so obviously they've been awarded their contract. Along with that, it's been the underground utility work, the underground electric, underground plumbing. Contractors have been awarded their respective trades and are now submitting shop drawings and have mobilized on site. We've also pre-purchased mechanical and electrical equipment due to the lead times of this equipment, so it's available when the site is ready to accept them. We've have award recommendation letters in with NYRA for major trades, including the curtain wall, superstructure concrete, major mechanical, air and wet side, plumbing, sprinkler, protection, hoist. So there's quite a bit of recommendations and extensive bidding that we've been doing already. We're currently, scoping out and bidding the major electrical trades as well as the architectural trades and getting ready to make a recommendation for structural steel and the canopy as well. But we're heavy right into the middle of the trade buyout recommendations and awards for the project. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I think you summed it up. If we want to get into the, minority, women and disabled vet participation,
Yeah, I'm going to get into that for just a second. I just want to go back a little bit for, again, more of an overview.
Sure.
Keeping a little bit of a focus on what the intention of the meeting here is, which is to try to at least provide some information relative to a constituency that might not be as familiar with the project as many around the table here are. You're talking about how you're bidding and what you're bidding, et cetera. How does that actually occur? So in other words, how are people aware that you have X contract out there, you have Y contract coming up, and how they're capable of participating in that?
Well, we develop initially a bid list where we do background checks and do community outreach programs to develop a qualified bidding list in which we in turn send to NYRA for their approval to go out to bid. Then we take the documents that have been issued to us architecturally, structurally, mechanically, and we basically split the project up into particular trades. Once we get the approved bid list back, we will go out to notify the bidders that the trade is being bid, and then they can respond if they're going to bid on the job or are going to pass on the job or have questions about it. It's all done, through Building Connected, which is an online, basically bidding program. So everything is kept confidential. The bids are submitted for the particular trade, and we arrange to have a bid opening meeting with the NYRA team and our team. So the bids are all open together. So no one obviously gets to get insight beforehand. Once the bids have been opened, then it gets back into our court, AECOM Tishman, where we do these scope meetings, which with each of the bidders for the particular trades to ensure that they have a complete scope and a complete bid, and any pricing adjustments at that point. And we will send out what we call clarifying addendums and rebid basically 2 and sometimes 3 or more rounds until we have a complete bid. And at that point, the lowest responsible bidder, we would make a recommendation to NYRA based on that. So that's kind of our procedure in a nutshell.
Okay. Anybody have questions relative to the procedure? You'd mentioned minority and women-owned business and service-disabled veteran-owned business utilization. So, yeah, I cut you off there. I would love to hear, you know, what is expected, what your status is, what your outreach efforts are, what you've done so far, and where there can be meaningful participation as a qualified entity that may be MWBE or service disabled.
Sure. We have had, we've had 2 outreach programs at the local Elmont Library in beginning of February, and we had one a couple months ago where local, businesses are invited to come in and hear about the project. We have a team from Tishman that focuses on this specifically for the outreach. We had one last week for the Long Island Association, which was very well received. We plan on having another one probably right after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, for what we call, meet the primes, meaning the contractors that we have awarded. The big contractors, we want to introduce them to local contractors, minority, women-owned, and service disabled vet organizations. We're very proactive in the procurement process with this aspect of the deliverables that are required from the state. We have 15% M, 15% W, and 6% service disabled goals on the project. We recently have made a recommendation, which is a very, very meaningful one, for superstructure concrete, which is it's approximately a $30 million contract, and it's for a minority contractor, M designation. It looks like we're going to be making a recommendation shortly for another trade that could be a service disabled vet organization, and it could be on the order of magnitude about a $7 million, $7 million contract. So we're very proactive in promoting this aspect of the project.
So you're having absolutely no concerns or expectations that you wouldn't be able to meet the numbers that were suggested for MWBE in service?
Well, it's a process, and it takes a while so if we award a contract, our contractors, part of our bid process, they have to put forth their best efforts in the bid documents to us on how they plan to attain these goals. And then it takes, after the contracts are awarded, then they will go and they will start making their own contracts with their respective, participation, targets, if you will, for lack of a better term. So it doesn't happen when we shake hands. That's a best efforts handshake. And then there's a process, could take, 4 to 6 months for, these bigger contractors to lock in on the, on the minority and women and veteran owned businesses. So it's a process.
One of the concerns we've seen, not with your contract at all, and I don't want to suggest that, but other things that we've had experience is ensuring that there's a meaningful commercially usable function analysis that's undertaken for any of the contracted vendors in the minority and women-owned business. Is it something that you guys do, or how is that ensured so that none of these contracts are being staged as pass-throughs?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Obviously what drives a MWBE contract is that there's actual participation, and it's not titularly owned by a woman who then is receiving the money off the top of the contract as a woman vendor and passes it through for non-women. So obviously that type of, I don't want to say, it's got such a terrible connotation by saying bid rigging, but it is an element of manipulation
of the spirit of the law.
That's exactly the turn of phrase I'm looking for, Mr. Higgins.
Yeah.
Who is doing that to ensure that the M's are actually M's, the W's are actually W's, and the SDs are actually SDs?
We have a very very detailed process for vetting, these different categories of contractors. We're very proactive with our, with our procurement people at our main office in the city. I don't know if you've seen what's happened out at a JFK. We're out there and we've awarded approximately $2 billion worth of minority contracts out there. So we have a track record, a very good track record in not having, pass-through type, contracts. That's something that we don't do. And so
I don't want to give any sort of indication that we think that's occurring. It's just obviously something from a state perspective, we're always sensitive to the criticism that it's being manipulated and is only figurehead as opposed to substantive. And I just want to get that on the record that you guys do something. There is obviously, as you point out, the track record at JFK, which was an enormous project that has had tremendous amounts of scrutiny as well. Again, the purpose of this is to try to ensure that the general public who might not be involved has a comfort level with what's occurring.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments. And that's something that we're very committed to, and our track record, attests to that.
Anyone have questions relative to MWBE or service disabled?
Yeah, just two questions. So your vetting process, is that above and beyond what ESD does in order to confirm the viability of an MWBE?
ESD.
Oh, sorry. Well, we have an internal process called Trade Tap, and it goes through financials, it goes through track record, it goes through ownership. And it's and we're very proactive in giving as much opportunity as we possibly can. We follow up. We keep pretty good records of our follow up with these contractors. And like I said, we're going to have we take this like in December or whenever we have the next meeting with this Meet the Primes. Some of the smaller firms, may get intimidated by our bid process because it is pretty comprehensive, pretty thorough. And once we get the bigger contractors on board, we do the follow-up meetings to get the smaller, contractors, to give them opportunity, introduce them to the big contractors. That's pretty successful on how we manage that, and we do that ongoing. We continue to have the job fairs, and we'll do that, through the course of the project as we go along.
One of the enhancements, with the CSIP, for instance, and one of the sort of barriers of entry for some of these smaller contractors, they can't get the proper insurance. So the CSIP gives us the ability to be able to get them up to our standards without having to push them through a screen.
And one of the things also is bonding. So if, the larger contractors, for example, a mechanical contractor who has a $30 million contract, there are a lot of parts and pieces to that contract. There's piping, there's insulation, there's structural supports for the mechanical infrastructure, et cetera. So those contractors are, we ask them, the big contractors, to break down some of their scopes of work and afford the opportunity for someone that could maybe take on a $1 or a $2 million subcontract to a $30 million major contract. So those are the kind of things that we push our contractors to do, to afford those kind of opportunities for the minority participation, and it works well for us.
And there's also probably one other thing to note. So I know NYRA and also a representative from Tishman, they do work in conjunction with ESD to make sure we're marketing to those MWBEs and SDVOBs that are registered with ESD.
This is all very helpful, so thank you. The second question regarding this area, so your two outreach programs that you've done, what type of participation or what type of attendance occurred, or levels of attendance occurred at these two programs?
The two outreach affairs at the Elmont Library, there are probably between 70 and 80 people each night on the two separate occasions. So it was pretty well attended. And, you know, that's over a span of a couple hours.
Yeah, no, that's a good, healthy number. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, it's just not for construction trades. It's also for local business, whether it's a deli or, you know, just a a hardware store, local businesses that could, you know, benefit from the work that is being conducted at Belmont.
Okay, so you're kind of casting a wide net then?
Yes, sir.
Beautiful. Okay, good, thank you.
Mr. Smith, any questions relative to MWBE? Okay. The other thing I wanted to at least bring up is the general workforce mobilization. Just from a high level again, what unions have been engaged, who's on the job, and what do we anticipate from a forthcoming basis?
Yeah.
Currently, we have, as I said earlier, station contractor, which is type of multiple of several unions, one being local 138, operating engineers, local 46 is lappers, cement masons and laborers, local 66. We also have electricians is local 25, which is on site, and the plumbers, I believe it's local 200 on the plumbers are on site now. That's currently what we have, maybe 40, 45 work people total on site right now.
Okay. Any questions relative to workforce? Chris? From a general standpoint, I kind of want to go through a little of the quality of life projects that we talked about in March, which were approximately 10 projects that were not part of the 455. This is more directed towards Glenn and his folk there from NYRA. And just get a kind of a status report on the ones that we had some expectation of completion during calendar year 2024. I am very cognizant that there's a big difference between anticipated and practical and outcome, but just to get some sort of a sense as to where we're at. I know, for instance, like on the new dormitory, dorm 3, you're expected perhaps to have the certificate of occupancy as soon as the end of this week. Which would put us obviously well before the conclusion of the calendar year and get that utilization. But you know, just moving through some of the other projects, and Glenn, as I mentioned them, if you could just kind of tick off concepts of where you're at on it would be helpful. The backstretch Wi-Fi coverage was originally anticipated to be completed by the conclusion of December. How is that moving along?
That's moving along very well, and that expected completion date is still on schedule. Tied to the Wi-Fi is also the fire alarm system for all the barns and cottages, so we're expecting to have that complete Q4 of this year. The other project that is also tied to that fiber backbone is the blue light system, the security system that we're not only incorporating at Belmont, but additionally, we're going to incorporate that at Saratoga as well. The other items that we're working on that you had mentioned, and if I could just take a moment to say the work with OGS and the permitting on all these projects in our weekly meeting has been exceptional. So having that communication and the dialogue and getting all the correct paperwork to them, they've been fantastic to deal with. So that has certainly helped us improve our timelines. In addition to what you had mentioned on dorm number 3, we've taken on the foundation work and MEPs on dorm number 4. So that foundation is already installed. We're currently doing all the underground on that. We're proposing to have the roof and have that dried in by December, so we can have some winter work for the trades here as well, for the union trades.
That still remain on target for April?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In addition to the dorm number 4. We've had a request for service put into OGS and FOB for the bike storage areas. We're expecting to have that submitted to OGS for review either the end of this week or the beginning of next week. In addition to that work, the gymnasium upgrade, as well as the track kitchen, that as well is done by the same architect that did the dorms, the Finney Design Group, and we're expected to have that completed by the end of the month for submittal as well. The plan for that.
Both of those projects were anticipated somewhere in 2025, right? The
Correct.
Gymnasium and the rec hall track kitchen?
Yes, and what we'd like to do is, again, if we're able to get foundations and get that dried in, just to, with the trades that we have, if we can split them up between the dorm and the laundry and rec area upgrade, be able to take care of that through the winter time as well. The other project that we've talked about with the quality of life that ties directly to the backstretch is the stormwater management of the property. So the significant upgrades of the drainage to all the racing surfaces, as well as taking some of the stormwater off of the facility, the apron, and work that was done in the training track for our material storage area, have also taken a tremendous amount of water, almost 90 acres of coverage that used to go into our sump at Belmont. So there's a significant improvement with the stormwater management. 3/4 of that work is complete already. And the remaining work, we're just, I've got materials for the turf courses that are in the way for wrapping up the installation of the last 50 of the 200 dry wells that are being installed.
If I can interrupt you for just a second, Glenn, I'm going to take you in a little bit of a different direction, but since you've kind of opened the door on the racing surfaces, while it's not part of the project or part of the quality of life, how are the racing surfaces progressing towards the completion? And you know, obviously it's wonderful if we get a grandstand that's up and running, but if the horses have nothing to run on, that obviously is a problem. So if you could just spend a couple of minutes just giving us an update on the surface.
Sure. So the tunnels are all complete that we have talked about in the past, meaning the grandstand tunnel, the pedestrian and commercial tunnel from the north lot, as well as the horse tunnel, which will access horses from both the barn area as well as the new grandstand clubhouse to the synthetic track. So those are all in place. We're currently working on the drainage of the surfaces themselves. So similar to what a athletic field is done, we have almost 7 miles of pipe to put in on the one turf course, 9 miles on the other, as well as all new surfaces from the bottom up, meaning new sub base, new drainage stone, sand, and then our growing medium. The rails are installed on the synthetic track. So the inner safety rail, all the posts are up for the inside and outside rail. We're expecting to start to install porous asphalt either the end of next week or the beginning of the following week for the interior 40 feet of the synthetic surface to be able to stockpile the Tapeta racing surface on that, with an anticipated completion date of early Q2 to mid Q2 of next year. So that way we have the ability to allow horses to start training on a 1 mile synthetic track. The 2 turf courses, we're in a blending process right now of the growing medium, and our anticipation is sometime around mid-November to start putting the growing medium down, and directly behind the growing medium, we will start to install sod. The sod has been secured for almost a year now, so we've had that grown on Long Island, so it'll be a natural transition in the same climate. And depending on how the weather responds this winter, we will continue with that work right through the winter time with approximate 10 tractor trailer loads a day. We'd be able to install basically a 1/16 of a mile of racing surface per day prepared track. The main track, we're currently, the installer from Kentucky is working with our union trades currently just with an oversight capacity for the install of the safety rail on the main track as well as the outside rail on the outer turf course with an anticipated completion of what we can do because material locations of 2 weeks on that. So the tracks are progressing very well. We're on schedule with the tracks. As I mentioned, there will be training on the synthetic early. We have not given a timeline on the main track just because of working with the project team not to impact any issues with the superstructure going up in the building. So we'll update this group as that develops to be able to see if there is the capability of giving even modified training hours if required next spring. And then the one other thing, if I could just to point out, as it was mentioned earlier about the TAO in September of 26, we will be in a position with the racetracks where we would look at a modified or the possibility of a modified Belmont Stakes in 26. And we would like to just keep that option open. It certainly wouldn't be a full building use, but again, we will update this group as that develops to see if there is the ability to host it, in a manner that's appropriate in 2026.
That would be a heck of a dry run for the Breeders' Cup as running the Belmont at Belmont. Just going back to the bike storage sheds, I know that you said the request is into FOB and OGS. From a practical standpoint, once approved, how long will it be to get the first shed out? I know that one of the concerns was to get that in alignment with the opening of the dormitory, which obviously could be as soon as the end of the week. So we look like we're a little bit off on that one, but how long is the development on a per shed basis?
It's a 2-week build on each one of them. And what we're trying to do is to have the sheds replicate the same materials that are used on all the dorms. So the aluminum framing, the ag metal roofing, and then just so that way it's the same materials and it's a very, very simple construction build, slab and basically the columns and then the bike storage racks that are pre-purchased, that are purchased off-site. So a 2-week build, within a month's time, we can have them in place.
Okay. One of the other the quality of life discussions that we had discussed back in March was the perimeter fencing improvements to ensure that unauthorized people stay out of the backstretch communities. I've been down there. Obviously, you're well, the substantial amount has been undertaken. Has that project been finalized?
We have the materials on site for both the area along Hempstead Turnpike and also along the border of Floral Park, where we finished phase 1 last year. We went back out to bid for the installation since NYRA procured the materials just on a cost basis. And we're awarding the installation for the 2 separate fence lines. So that work should be able to commence within the next 60 days.
Okay.
And that would basically wrap up from gate 5, the main entrance, down to Plainfield Ave, over to gate number 7. And then we would go from Walnut and Floral Park over to the Floral Park Belrose School on Larch.
Okay. Thank you. I think that hits all the quality of life projects that we discussed back in March. Anyone have any additional questions relative to obviously the quality of life or anything else that we might have missed?
Hi,
Mr. Hager?
they're unrelated to the quality, just more general questions. Are we experiencing any delays on permitting with some of the local municipalities or other agencies down there?
Everything is still
permits or anything like that?
No, everything is through the Office of General Services, and they've been excellent to work with in permitting. And with DEC and all of the required agencies has been excellent.
Okay, and then just my other question, is there any potential cost overruns at this point in time that you guys can oversee as far as any of the materials are concerned or the cost of labor as it relates to the project and the overall budget?
Not at this point. As was mentioned earlier, there was some value engineering that went into some of the interiors just with material finishes, but at this point, no overruns.
Anyone else have anything? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just a question for Glenn. What is the current number of backstretch employees housed at Belmont?
Right now, there's just over, I believe it's 830 people on site right now. We've got the capacity for up to 1,000. And the plan is once the dorms are in place and we get dorm number 3, we've identified certain cottages that we would then demolish and remove from the capacity. So we would still stay at 1,000 beds at Belmont Park, but just remove some of the older facilities. So we've got the paperwork set up to be able to put in for a demo permit for those structures once dorm 3 is, we receive the CCC for that.
Is the 830 significantly down from what it would normally be at this time?
It's tracks about, we're anywhere from 800 to 1,000, and at this point, we've got some trainers that have moved some horses out of state, and then you'll start to see it'll bump back up once Saratoga closes, when some of the outfits move back here for the winter operations. So we'll hover right around 900 people through the winter time.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I just want to go back to one question that was discussed very early about the $70 million distribution and the process whereby about once you reach 35 million spent, another request is made. Do you specify the level of the request each time, or is it $70 million each time?
We specify the request each time. We forecast what we would need that money for based on our cash projections. So no, it's different each time based on the project's needs.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? In closing, I appreciate you taking the time for this. Again, the idea is to try to get some of the information on what Belmont is what's occurring at Belmont, how it's occurring, who's involved in it, what the format is going forward for participation is really was the main goal. I think we hit a little bit of that. I would like the opportunity to do this again in a month to 6 weeks when we get a little bit more development and perhaps a second request going in, et cetera, and try to refine to make this a little bit more focused to address any of the inquiries that we may receive, either from the Gaming Commission, from the legislature, or the legislative houses, or from the FOB itself as to any questions relative to the project that we can try to at least get out there in public. I appreciate you taking the time and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.